Buenos dias. I'm in Bueo.
Did you think it was that bad at Spanish?
It's great here. It's gloomy. It's very green. It's beautiful and it's very wet, which after Cyprus is the perfect change for us. It's similar to, if you've ever been to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, it's very similar climate. I guess some people call that weather depressing because it's gray, it's wet, it's cloudy. But to those people I say, have you ever been to Sweden? Don't talk to me about gloomy weather if you haven't. Anyway, what did you think of that intro? Not too long and too slow, I hope? You know, don't waste time. Get to the point quickly, they say. It's all about audience retention. And that might be true if your video is all about information, but this one isn't. It's about atmosphere. I was watching Rick Beato's interview with Maynard a while back, and in that conversation they talk about headphone music, which was a bit of a wake-up call for me for two reasons. First, it was an important reminder and somewhat of a reality check because I definitely make headphone music. I write and mix all my music in headphones due to the circumstances of my life. And I suppose in a weird way I was allowing myself to forget that that's not how everyone hears my music or my videos. So the details I like to add and play with, all the little nuances, the panning and the effects might be lost on most people who come across my stuff, which is kind of a bummer because it's such an important part of what I like to do. But on the other hand, that's the reality of today, like it or not. I mean, some people even listen to music primarily on their phones, for crying out loud. The second reason is that I've been thinking for a while now that I need to leave more space in my compositions. I need to let sections breathe and develop a little bit more organically. But letting sections breathe and leaving enough space takes not only experience, but it takes a certain level of confidence as well. To have the guts to trust the composition and not just hide everything in layers and production. It reminds me of something I heard Devin Townsend say in an interview somewhere. I don't remember where I heard it and I don't have the exact quote, but the sentiment was something like, the reason he developed his very distinct style of layering his voice and his kind of the production that he's known and famous for, right? The wall of sound and all the effects and everything is essentially because he didn't like to hear the sound of his own voice. So he was hiding it or almost drowning it in all this production. Because the voice is so personal, right? It's so intimate, it's so uniquely you in a way. And I think I do that too in my own music. Not so much hiding my voice per se, even though I do that too, but hiding my music, hiding my compositions in production. Because in my head I still have this hopefully very false and distorted idea that I'm gonna get caught or called out. So I constantly need to create little distractions and throw these little nuggets in order to not get caught. Almost like a stage magician kind of going like, oh, look over here, look over here. Don't pay attention to what's going on over here. Don't mind the awkward chord change or the slightly out of tune note or whatever. No, just focus over here, stay over here, okay? I think I do that too in a way. But I digress. Back to Maynard for a second, because in that interview he also says, and this time I do quote, everything is a commercial now, it's a TikTok video, and it's got to jam all this shit into a tight space and just get up in your business immediately without any kind of digestion or room for thought, which I completely agree with, yet I am guilty of this very same thing, I think. But a crucial part of headphone music is to hear the silence between the notes, to provide those little moments of reflection or digestion, as Maynard put it. Then all that intense stuff hits even harder, because in the absence of ear fatigue or total and complete satiation, you get anticipation. And if you want to create a palpable atmosphere, you need a lot of anticipation. Let me give you an example. I like horror movies. But I can't stand movies that rely on jump scares and cheap formulaic tricks like that. I find them annoying because they're a painful reminder that I'm in fact watching a movie and that I'm watching a scene specifically designed to make me scared. Not through storytelling, but through shortcuts, formulas, cheap tricks, if you will. And I don't like that. It takes me out of the story. It takes me out of that world. I like scary movies that develop slowly and that tells a story that's just drenched in atmosphere and tone and vibe, that feel organic, full of texture, with interesting characters, events, and ideas that haunt me for much longer than the duration of the actual movie, where the anticipation is constant throughout the story and not just when a person is slowly walking down the stairs to check out what the sound in the poorly lit basement was. The parallels to music are obvious, and I don't want to rely on jump scares. I want a more holistic approach, if you will.
In the first episode of this series, I laid out the sounds that I want to go for with this release, based on what I personally love and what I think I'm capable of doing within the limitations I'm currently working under. On that list, it mentions things like dark mood, pagan, ambience, dark again, earthly textures, atmosphere. And to me, they all really paint a picture. I want to create a sonic universe that you can allow yourself to just get lost in. A world you can escape to, because that's what I love and care about. So how does one do that?
Well, one key thing is setting the mood right off the bat and staying true to that throughout the whole thing. And as cliche as it is, dedicating some time on the opening track to really set the scene and paint a picture for the listener can be a powerful way of doing this. You can do this with sound effects, movie samples, manipulation of sounds overall, or just taking the time to introduce important musical ideas or motifs to create a certain mood or evoke a certain emotion early on. Kind of like an overture, I suppose, depending on how much you want to think of it as one whole thing and how prepared it is versus just how much you want to think of it as just individual songs put together. But utilizing this opportunity well is important, right? Because it's your first and perhaps most important chance to communicate what is to come, to introduce yourself, and not just the song, but the whole thing. Now, to some people, it's an immediate deal breaker and a textbook skippable moment. I get that. Get to the song already and all that stuff, but I'm a huge fan of this practice. There's something nostalgic about it too, isn't it? Like a throwback to when listening to music meant just that, active listening. It's almost like a mystical experience, isn't it? I mean, take a classic record like Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. It's packed with atmosphere, carefully crafted effects, and amazing sound design. And it takes 2 minutes and 25 seconds before any vocals enter. I mean, that's almost the entire length of a pop song. Or take a classic, moody, atmospheric song like The End by The Doors. 54 seconds until Jim enters. Or even better, take the most iconic, atmospheric heavy metal album in history. Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath from 1970. It's hard to think of a more atmospheric album opener, or album for that matter. It takes 38 seconds for anyone in the band to enter, and then another 46 seconds for Ozzy to jump in. That means the first 38 seconds or more are just purely there to introduce the listener to the world of Black Sabbath for the very first time. And the song is 6 minutes and 17 seconds. So that means it takes 22% of the song before we even get to hear Ozzy. Just as a curiosity, I looked up the biggest pop song of last year, of 2021. And Google here tells me it was Bad Habits by Ed Sheeran. Who knows, but let's go with that one. It begins with a count-in, then some vocalization with no words, and then the actual singing enters at 10 seconds. That's 4% of the song, if we don't include hearing what I assume is Ed count to 4 and then hum along for a bit. And this is the mantra of today, in everything. We're all being bombarded with the same message that people don't have the attention span to handle anything anymore, especially not a long intro with no other purpose than to set the mood. that there's no way to create that kind of anticipation anymore. Just get to the song, fill the space, don't waste time. But I don't know if I buy that, and I like long intros. I like songs that take their time. I like atmosphere, and I can't be alone, right? Either way, I wanted to make something atmospheric, so I'm going for the long intro, the slow opener. And I wanted to get creative, and I wanted to make it special, since this is such a big deal for me, so I asked the help of two very special people. My kids. I asked them to sound strange and creepy as I was recording them, and here are some examples of what that sounded like.
Don't wait! I want you.
They loved that. I then took the various recordings that we did, and I reversed some parts, I slowed down other parts, I added reverbs, and some of all of that came out sounding like this. Now recall again that some of my keywords were pagan and earthly textures. So I try to keep that in mind when I put everything together, and in context, that same snippet sounds like this.
Obviously, there's more to atmosphere than sound effects, samples, and ominous weather. But they certainly set the tone, if you ask me. Space is another huge one. Pacing, mixing, giving songs room to breathe, instrumentation, scales, tempo, textures, peaks and valleys. It's about the sum of all the parts and the effect that it all has, right?
As I'm wrapping this up, another great example comes to mind, and it's a song called Long Way to the Graves by a band called Ghost Brigade. It's nothing but drums for the first 30 seconds, and then clean guitars enter, and then vocals enter at around 1 minute 35 seconds. And it's one line sung slowly, and then the same line echoes back with almost like a radio effect, and next vocal line, same thing. And the same drums are still going throughout. And it's such a lesson in space, in taking the time to tell a story. It's so effective. And it's probably my favorite song on the entire album. It takes 5.5 minutes for the heavier guitars to kick in, and we're pretty much talking about a melodic death metal band here. It's just brilliant. It's amazing. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching and for leaving comments. I never take that for granted, and I cannot stop doing this, apparently. Have an amazing day, wherever you are in the world, and please take care. Bye-bye.